offender, the victim has officially and publicly stated that they forgive the criminal, which will later be explained in my mechanism. And today, the motion today is about how justice is considered served when the victim actually forgives the crime. So, there are four stakeholders in today's debate, right? Which is victims, criminal, authorities, and society. And we tell you on government side why we cater to the best interest. Because on our side, victim is given a proper closure and proper justice because it is their own consent to forgive the crime. Whereas for criminals, a criminal would want justice to, would want to be properly would want to be forgiven and released. Wherefore, and for authorities, the authorities would definitely want to serve a proper justice for all because justice should be served fairly. And as for society, integration will occur better, but it will be explained with my second speaker. So now, what the government wants to please sit down. What the government wants to achieve today is that we want to serve justice and be fair to all. And today's mechanism would be, first, the victim must provide a solid proof of forgiveness, which means that we will ask them to provide a black and white letter that is signed or perhaps given a thumbprint in front of the authorities, or perhaps a recording in case that person is unable to sign it by hand or so, in front of the authorities as well. And next, right, we only allow the criminal to sit down, please. We only allow the criminal to be forgiven once, which means that if the criminal continues to do the crime, or if the criminal does another crime, they will not be forgiven, even if the victim forgives them. And second, it applies for all crimes except capital punishment crimes, because we understand that capital punishment crime is a serious crime that a lot of people victims themselves cannot forgive, and it should be heavily punished. And if a criminal is found guilty of forcing the victim to sit down, then the criminal will be charged under a heavier case and will be given heavier punishment. Moving on to my point, right? My first point is it's retribution at its best. Why? Because we understand that retribution is a form of compensation for a crime, for something bad that has happened to you. In this case, the crime that has occurred to the victim. So by retribution, it happens best on our side because the victim itself is forgiving them. By the fact that the victim is forgiving them, it means that the victim is willing to let go, is willing to move on, and is willing to put this crime behind them. So, because we understand that prosecution, the fact that prosecution is a long process. It's a long process that will go through paperwork, trial, and the victims wouldn't want to go through all these messy processes if they intended to move on from this crime in the first place, right? By not allowing them to just let the crime go, by forgiving them, by forcing them to go through all these complicated things, you're telling them as a government that, hey, you have to go through this complicated process so we can emotionally scar you more, and we want you to go through all this pain. So we want you to go through all this pain because we believe that it's proper justice. If I am a victim and if I don't want to face it, then let me just forgive and forget. Because I understand this, that today in this debate, the lowest common denominator is the victims themselves. So we should be able to cater to them. We should be able to allow them to make the decision. Because in status quo, right, the fact that things like the fact that desperation does not make the punishment, or does not become a mitigating factor. The fact that if I am Kim Kardashian and I own $2 billion of assets and someone steals it from me, the fact that if I want to allow this to happen, if I see it as something like donating to charity, then it's okay if I want to forgive the crime because it is under my right, my consent, and I want to move on from it. So if the victim can understand the dire need of desperation for this to happen, then it is okay for the victim to just forgive that. And by forgiving, integration can happen better, which will then be explained by our second speaker. And because they have the right to choose, it is their bodily autonomy to choose whether or not they want to forgive them. It is my right. I can decide for myself. You don't feel, because other people don't feel the emotions I feel, so I can choose for myself. But before that, yes.
So if you're going to punish them after they commit the same crime again, doesn't that prove that forgiveness isn't the best case solution?
The fact that we're not going to allow them to repeat the crime, the fact that we forgave them in the first place is a method for us to allow the criminal to reform better. Because by forgiving them, we send them a message that you have to change, otherwise some punishment will be seriously handled upon you. So moving on, right, as I said earlier, it is a bodily autonomy. We get to decide on what we want to decide for ourselves. Nobody else feels for us. Nobody else understands our compassion. Nobody else understands our emotions and how much we want to move on from this. So with that, go for side government.
The Prime Minister spent 6 minutes and 21 seconds. Then, to start the case from the opposition bench, here is the leader of opposition, Mr. Daniel Faisal, to present the case of the opposition bench. Here.
When someone commits a crime, it is the responsibility of government to punish them. This is a principle of law. Government cannot deny this. So, Madam Chair, Mr. Speaker, two justifications from the government. First, why we should prosecute someone that breaks the law. Second, why emotions are the opposite of criminals, because we do concede that emotion cannot simply change criminals to objective. We are going to uphold the four pillars of law. Second, we want to hold these criminals accountable. Three arguments that will be presented by opposition: purpose of law, second, reoccurrence of crime, third, manipulation of sympathy. And my arguments will be a full rebuttal of their arguments and also their mechanism. But before that, Madam Chair, we need to look at the characterization of these offenders. But first, we need to look at the social contract. Social contract means government have mutual relationship with citizens. Therefore, government must provide protection. However, these offenders are also citizens. When they break the law, therefore they break social contract. Sit down. And someone who breaks social contract are considered criminals. Therefore, government have the responsibility to prosecute them and therefore punish them. However, we believe that government cannot scope this, and therefore government did not define any sort of crime that is involved in this debate. Therefore, we believe that is the failure of the government side. Therefore, discredit them, Mr. Speaker. Government cannot scope this to petty crime, because at the end of the day, you are opening the door for more crimes, opening the door towards all crime. For example, rape and also murder, right? But then, for example, in the case of rapists and also murderer, so what if someone forgive them? We think we need to look at the nature of this rapist and also murderer. So, for example, rapist. Whenever this rapist sees someone or sees a vulnerable woman, they have the urge to rape this woman. You cannot deny this. And and you cannot deny this because this is the true nature of rapists. And for example, in the case of murderers, sit down. These are the people who are aggressive. They are willing to do anything to stand up for themselves and also killing. This is why we cannot forgive these criminals in the first place. So second, why does victim forgive? We think that yes, we do consider to the fact that victims have this sort of sympathy, but we believe that the problem is that these people lacks of rational calculus. They are giving sympathy because they are manipulated by the act of these criminals in the first place, and this is why we believe that it is problematic in the mechanism, because they say that sympathy, for example, forgiveness can somehow rehabilitate this person. Criminals, sit down. But we tell you the fact that they consider to the fact that forgiveness cannot change these people. Their mechanism is that whenever these people commit the same crime, then therefore even if forgiveness are given, these people will still be prosecuted. Therefore, forgiveness does not work on the government side. Discredit them, Mr. Speaker. So again, what are the harm when these people get away from prosecution? For example, yes, we do concede that victim may have closure, but however, their forgiveness does not represent the whole society. Because we need to consider it to the fact that society, whenever they hear someone commits crime, whenever they hear criminals, they want these people to be punished. And therefore, the voice of one individual doesn't represent the whole society. Sit down, I'm not even finished talking yet. So right now, when these offenders get away, we think that right now reoccurrence may happen because this is the true nature of criminals themselves, right? And right now, when these people get away, when these people are released from any sort of probation, we believe that right now, society will be living in fear. Yes, you might be giving closure to this victim, but at the end of the day, you are not giving the closure towards society, and therefore retributions does not happen. Your side fails in this motion. So we are willing to do trade-off because yes, you may be catering to the one individual, but we tell you a good government must always cater to the whole society as a whole, right? So what are the consequences to the government? This is why I'll move on to the purpose of law, which is my argumentation. We think that right now there are four principles of law, which is first rehabilitation, retribution, deterrence, and also safety. The reason why we should prosecute them because punishment works in the works in the current status quo. They never prove to us why in the current status quo punishment does not work. Therefore, again, discredit them, Mr. Speaker. Right now, for example, if these people go to jail, we believe right now it is far more effective rather than emotion. Because as I've already told you, emotion fails in the government. If we jail them, therefore they will learn that they are the ones who are responsible. You have to face the consequences of breaking the law. Second, retribution. Yes, your side may serve retribution for the sake of the victim, but we tell you retribution is better on our side because we believe that whenever you commit crime, this is the consequences that you should face. Therefore, retribution happens on our side. Deterrence, right? Sit down. For example, right now, if we prosecute them, we are sending stern messages to these people that you cannot get away with punishment whenever you commit crime. You have to be held accountable because you are the ones who are responsible for the damage that happened to a victim. This is why deterrence happens on our side and not their side. This is why again government fails in this debate. So fourth, safety. Because right now, I've proven to you that deterrence may happen on our side. We believe right now we are providing safety to a society because they do not have to worry. Because right now, these rapists wouldn't even be released to society, and therefore these crimes could be deterred from happening among the society. So let us compare government's work and also opposition's work. We believe right now their best case scenario, yes, they might be giving closure, they may be giving second chance to this criminal, but then they might also give closure to the forgivers themselves. However, right now, on the opposite side, we are catering to the whole society. So whenever we are catering to the whole majority, it is very important. So right now, their side doesn't uphold the principles of law. On our side, we are upholding the pillars of law themselves. This is why the opposition wins this debate. We are telling you that right now, forgiveness of one victim doesn't represent the whole society, and therefore, this is why opposition wins this debate even to begin with. Go with side opposition. Thank you.
The leader of opposition spent 7 minutes and 14 seconds. To continue the debate, I would like to call the Deputy Prime Minister, Ms. Aisyah Nadira, to continue the case of the government bench. Here. That's fine. Hello everyone, welcome to Interdebate MRSM 2017, and let's see how government side wins this debate, right? But before that, a few clarifications. This motion is very, very interesting to begin with. The fact that how justice is supposed to the purpose of law is to serve justice to begin with, and how justice should happen on our side better than your side, right? But further clarifications into this debate. Number one, when I talk about how the clarifications about capital punishment, we already established to you in our mechanism that capital punishment should be excluded in this debate. And what is capital punishment, right? In the case of they are so shallow. The fact that capital punishment involves murder, multiple assassination and targeted killings to begin with, that is considered as capital punishment. Therefore, those things or those issues could not be discussed in today's debate. But secondly, right, we talk about how sympathy happens and manipulation happens. We would deny the fact that we want manipulation to happen. We wanted to minimize manipulation to begin with. But to the fact that if the victim is considered as being manipulated or considered as being targeted by those victims to begin with, the fact that if there are consensus on that and if we can detect those kind of notions to begin with, we will continue prosecute them in further extent, right? But what happens in today's debate? Even if those sympathy exists, right? In the worst case scenario, even if sympathy exists, example, if I give my donuts, if I have 2 donuts and I give it to a child who is hungry, that was considered as sympathy to begin with. If I consented to that sympathy, why is it wrong for me to give the donut to the children who are hungry to begin with? We believe that those sympathy, in those circumstances, would never hamper the progression of this kind of notion to begin with. No, thank you. Next, move on to the best part of my speech. This is the best integration between the offenders and the society. Because the claim to us that society would never be satisfied with this kind of notion, with our policy, right? Let's respond to this. And let's see how society will respond to this, right? By my previous integration between the offenders and society, what do we mean by this? Punishment are meant to give lessons, retribution, punishment, and deterrence to begin with. The further we disintegrate the victim, the further we disintegrate the offenders or the criminals within the society, it means that they cannot comprehend more with the society to begin with. The larger the gap that we provide towards the criminals and the society, the harder it is for them to integrate back and contribute back to the society to begin with. And secondly, right, what do we mean by this? It's considered as how the society move on from this kind of stigma, from the atrocities of this crime to begin with. And the fact that in our case, this cause would happen better. Before I move on to my substantive, go.
But don't you think that when a criminal undergoes prosecution and has fulfilled his punishment, society will accept him better?
The fact that even if they go to under prosecution, the fact that if the victim itself has not forgiven this kind of criminals, the fact that closure would never happen better, but let's extend on my side, right? How are the stakeholders involved on this integration? First, the society and victim's family, and also the criminals. How is this important, ladies and gentlemen? Number one, progression would better happen on our side. How? We believe that progression happens when the society can integrate them back, and this cause could be available between the society and the criminals itself. We believe that in first-timer criminals, right, the fact that they have been oppressed in certain circumstances. Example, if I wanted to rape a girl, therefore I might be desperate for certain circumstances. If I as a girl comprehend the fact that I forgive the offender for raping me, the fact that if that sympathy happens, or even if that consideration would happen in the discourse, it would better provide the society to accept that, hey, the victim has the bodily autonomy to the fact that they can accept the consensus of these crimes. Therefore, society would happen to better respect the victims and the victims' families' responses and the victim's family decision towards this kind of notion. Because in the fact that society have to help this victim and victim's family to better move on, to better integrate with society more, therefore, the society will further respect this kind of decision. But secondly, right, for society to accept these first-timer criminals to better understand them, to the fact that, hey, the minute when I steal a bread from a certain shop because I live in poverty, right, the fact that if this 10 ringgit is something that I should steal from this kind of person, the fact that if I'm the one who gets this robbery issue, therefore I feel that I have to forgive the victim because of this mitigating factor. Therefore, why not? The fact that if the victim itself consented to the fact that this circumstance is very, very desperate, this circumstance is understandable on their side, the society will comprehend better, because in the first place, it's the victim's bodily autonomy and rights to even forgive them. No, thank you. They will forgive them in the first place. Lastly, right, it is the best protection for society. 2 reasons why. Number one, the main purpose of rehabilitation and punishment is to make the offender or criminals a better contributing part of society. The further you integrate, disintegrate them, right, the further you shame them, the further you punish them for the first time crime that they have done, they feel less and less interested to contribute back to society, and they feel less and less deterred to feel like, oh, I have to contribute more, I have to be nice to those kind of victims to begin with. But what happens if they do the crime again? No, thank you. What happens if they do the crime again, right? The fact that if they do the crime again, we further prosecute them, and it also acts the best act of deterrence to begin with. Because the fact that, hey, if you done this crime once and the victim's family forgive you, but if the second time, even if the victim's family forgive you, we would not continue this kind of notion. Because we believe that in the second time of crime, you plan
choice to actually plan a crime, and you have received the fact that it is considered as a deterrent to begin with. But secondly, right, how will society respond to this? They will further understand the circumstances. The fact that society will continue to shaming this kind of criminals. The fact that these criminals will undergo various processes. And also the victim's family, those kind of witnesses, will go to will go to trials. The fact that they will go to various interrogation cases, they will go to rooms and be interrogated, and these witnesses will be drained out of emotions because they believe that they have to go to the court and forcefully give out this information when even they wanted to move on in the first place. And why is it legitimate? It's legitimate. 3 reasons why. Because firstly, it's bodily autonomy, and secondly, it's the rights to forgive in the first place, and thirdly, integration and discourse would better happen on our side. And how does this bring the significance, right? Even in the worst case scenario, in our side, right, even crime is crime, and is considered as a violation of law. The fact that even if the first-timer criminals are somewhat consented to this crime, right? Even if that happens, what would happen in our side? The fact that if the criminals, if the victim itself conceded upon forgiving these kind of notions, it provides the narrative that, hey society, if you think that this crime should be forgiven, therefore go for it. It is not mandatory for you to give this kind of forgiveness for all first-time criminals to begin with. We never said it's mandatory for all first-time criminals to, hey, forgive them. No. The fact that you have the choice now, the fact that an avenue of choice is under your hand to begin with, the fact that this kind of forgive is considered justice, the fact that it's your body autonomy, it's your justice. Thank you.
The Deputy Prime Minister spent 7 minutes and 19 seconds. Then, to continue our debate today, I would like to call the Deputy Leader of Opposition, Ms. Fatini Anura, to continue the case of the Opposition's bench. Here.
Yes.
This House will not prosecute a crime where the victim has forgiven the offender, right? So what is the objective of this motion in the first place, right? Is to uphold the law better, which is four pillars of law: safety, rehabilitation, retribution, and deterrence, right? These 4 things contribute to justice, which the law has to serve rather than the victim, right? What is the outcome that we need to achieve in this debate, right? We want to prevent the reoccurrence of the crime happening in the first place, right? Because crime is not something that society will forgive so easily. So, what are the faults in their case in the first place, right? What they want to do is they want to give a chance for the criminal, another chance for the criminal, a subjective chance that is the decision of the victim in the first place, but a chance for this criminal to repent and so on and so forth. We tell you that number one, you have never given us the justification on why this criminal deserves another chance given by the victim. That is number one. Number two, why is it that the victim is the one giving this criminal a chance, even though the criminal, the crime that he did does not only affect the victim, does not affect society and affects the law enforcement in the government itself, right? That's two problems in their case, right? Number three, I will tell you about how the sympathy that they want to fight for in this debate is warranted. We believe that yes, sympathy could happen, but it's not mutually exclusive on their side. Right? Sympathy could happen on the outside. The victims can still forgive these criminals on our side. But we tell you that even if this criminal is forgiven, they have to serve the law. They have to be punished first before they are released by society, because we believe that under this paradigm, society will accept them better because they see that this criminal has been given back what they took away from this criminal, and reoccurrence will not happen, because forgiving and punishing are two different things that we believe could decide whether or not a crime will happen again, and whether or not more criminals will come out and attempt crimes because they will be forgiven anyways, right? But before that, yes.
The fact that if you even if you forgive or sympathy happens on your side, government will continuously provide protection towards society, even if the sympathy is given.
Okay? Again.
Even if sympathy will happen even little on your side, right? The government will still continuously protect the society because it's the duty of government to begin with.
We tell you that yes, the government has the duty to protect the society, right? But sympathy is not something that can protect the society. This criminal can do it again. This criminal, because they've never been prosecuted for the first time crime, but it's to see that they won't do it again. Why is to say that, oh, I can do it again. I was never punished for the first time, so why not I do it again, right? This could happen, and does not only affect the criminal itself, right? This affects to other parts of society that are inclined to actually doing crime, right? These people are like, oh, this crime. This person, he was not prosecuted for doing the crime for the first time. So what about I can go do a crime one time because no one is going to punish me for it. This victim will forgive me. I just have to act all sad and guilty, and this victim will sympathize for me and I can get away scot-free. This is not what the government wants. Right? The government wants to uphold the 4 pillars of law, which is retribution, deterrence, rehabilitation, and safety. Right? And this is how our side of the debate can cater to 4 pillars of law and can cater to all the stakeholders, which is the society, the victim, the criminals, and the government in the first place, right? So moving on to the thoughts on their case is that their main purpose, their only purpose of their side, they kept talking about retribution and how it forgive. We tell you that there are 3 other purposes of law you have to cater to as well, right? Which is safety, deterrence, and so on, which I've already said, right? We tell you that their way of punishing these criminals are ineffective and could actually warrant for more crimes to happen in the first place, right? So this is how my second point comes into play, which is the manipulation of sympathy and the reoccurrence of crime. Manipulation of sympathy can happen like this. The criminals now see that their crimes can be forgiven by just the victim saying that it's okay. They can manipulate for that sympathy, right? They can act like they're guilty, they can act like, oh, I already repented for this crime, and they will get away from the conviction, right? This is how they could try to fight for that victim sympathy even though they know what they did was wrong. This is likely to happen because criminals are ruthless, they are cunning and they are smart. They are not dumb people who just decide to do crimes, right? They calculate each one of their moves, right? And this could happen during the prosecution, which is when the victim will want to choose whether or not they will forgive this victim, right? So this is how we do not let this thing happen on our side of the debate. We tell them that they have to get the punishment even if the victim has forgiven them. Last point.
Upholding to the principle of punishment, how justice is served to the victim who consented to not go through the process of prosecution to begin with.
We tell you that the person that is doing wrong in this debate today is the criminal themselves, right? The victim has done nothing wrong, right? Of course they have the right to sympathy, but we tell you that if this sympathy could make this criminal do the crime again, if this sympathy could affect other people in society who this criminal could do wrong to again, we tell you that we don't need this sympathy, we need to punish the victim anyway. Okay. How will reoccurrence of crime happen on our side of the debate? We tell you that reoccurrence under this argument tells you that when this crime did a certain crime, another person could do the same crime and which we will concede to happen, right? Because yes, maybe the criminal cannot have closure. Oh, this victim has already forgiven me, but this government still wants to punish me. Of course the criminal are unhappy with the government. We tell them that it's okay. This criminal is still wrong and we still have to convict them, right? And even if they do reoccur the crime because they think that the government is being unfair, we will punish them right again. Even from the get-go, we punish them and we tell you that as the warning, no crime can be forgiven even if the victim forgives you. So right, the victim is society, right? They tell you about the victim giving closure and the victim already forgiven. We tell you, retribution is not about getting forgiveness from the people, right? Retribution is about you getting back what you gave to the criminal, right? You did wrong to the criminal. Maybe you harassed them, you stole something from them, but you have the social contract says that you have to serve for it, right? You have to serve the jail time. Just forgiving, it doesn't send a clear message to this crime, to these criminals that they shouldn't be doing it again and that what they did is wrong, right? It just kind of validates what the criminal has done, right? And it will open doors for other criminals to do the same thing. So the victims who are actually forgiving, we tell you what's happening on their side. The victims who have already forgiven these criminals, they are not in the rational state of mind, right? They have been wronged by these people. Of course, they're emotionally distressed or they are confused about what's happening. So, and furthermore, this criminal is manipulating them for their sympathy, right? So this is how they will give a warrant of forgiveness out of emotional instability. Emotional instability does not calculus. We tell you that emotional instability should not warrant for forgiving of a crime. We tell you that when these people are distressed, they do not know what they're doing when they warrant for the victim's criminal doings, right? So after this happens, the victim will just get away and do the crime again. And a few days later, when the victim thinks, oh, I shouldn't have forgiven the crime, it doesn't matter anyway because the criminal has already gotten away with their crimes, and this is how their side is saving all these criminals that shouldn't be saved, right? So what is the comparative in this debate today? We tell you that no matter what happens, no matter who forgives you or whatever amount you pay, you have to pay for what you did, right? Criminals, they are cunning and ruthless. They will do anything to get away from doing the crime in the first place, right? And we do not forgive them under any circumstance because the law is not upheld by a victim who is emotionally unstable. The law is upheld by the government. The government is the one holding the fortunes of law, and these victims do not understand and cannot sympathize with this victim just because it's sad to see them being punished.
The deputy leader of opposition spent 8 minutes and 4 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable adjudicators, now I would like to welcome the government whip, Mr. Muhammad Alif Afifi, to support the case of the government bench. Hear him.
So hello everyone. We believe today in this debate, none of us are CIA that which should uphold the principle of punish first, then talk second, that should torture first, then negotiate second. We believe that integration better in our side, progression is better in our side, thus government should win this debate. So clarifications coming from side government. We believe first, progression happens better in our paradigm because the society have the consent to actually move on. Second, integration happens better in our side because the offender have this opportunity or chances to actually reform themselves and actually to learn from their mistakes. And even if the worst case scenario they repeat their crime, they will still be prosecuted at the end of the day. Third of all, we believe clarifications coming from our side, justice is served by fulfilling both offenders and also victims' consent, and also the best interest to actually integrate and also move on and develop the society to begin with. So, stakeholders involved in this debate today. We believe that both of our sides can concede that the victims, offender, and authority and society is the main stakeholders involved in this debate. We believe it is the best interest of society. It is the best interest of victims and offenders and authority. Why? Because it is the best interest of the victim to actually move on to form from a case that they consented to actually forgive. Those cases without the consent of the victims to actually forgive will be prosecuted. This is not a form of affirmative action or something that is mandatory for them to actually forgive all the criminals to begin with. We do not agree that punishment should be terminated or destroyed. We believe that punishment still happens at the end of the day if the victims actually consent or actually opt to punishment. But if they consent and if they are willing to actually move on and forgive the criminals by the fullest consent and by fullest empathy that they have, then why not? Second, the offender, it is the best interest it is the best interest of the offender itself to be given a chance to actually reform and be forgiven. Even if they took it for granted, even if they took the apology for granted and they repeat on doing the other crimes, they will know, they will have the narrative that they will be prosecuted for the second time. So this motion is very, very crucial for the first-timers criminals who do it for the factors of desperation or any factors that actually put them in the place that they had to actually commit certain crimes. Sit down. So we believe it is also the best interest of authority to actually serve a proper justice to the society, and believe by the side opposition that it is a proper justice for us to uphold to the principle of punishment. But we believe that if the punishment itself doesn't serve what the victims actually want or what the offenders actually deserve, it is not justice at all. And it is the best interest of the society to most probably to have a proper narrative that they can actually develop and integrate better with these criminals if they deserve certain apologies and whatnot. So rebuttals coming from side government. Before that, yes.
If you already concede that the first time might not work, why do you justify that you give this criminal a chance to get away even in the first place?
Because we believe that by this policy, we can actually integrate better. These first-timers, we explained to you by the previous speakers how these crimes are committed because of those desperation factors or those factors that they can actually opt out from, and they should deserve this apology if the victims actually consented to. But even if these offenders are actually crying and begging for forgiveness, but if the victims doesn't consent to, then we should punish them. But we believe that is also the best thing to do, and because it fulfills the demand of the society that actually want to forgive this kind of criminal. Rebuttals coming from the opposition, side government. Opposition is trying to say that crimes are still crimes and need to be punished, but punishment serves justice supposedly, but justice is not served to both sides. How victims try to actually move on, try to actually reform themselves from these certain crimes, and they do not cater to that. They do not cater to the stakeholders where victim actually consented and actually want to actually opt out from going through these processes of prosecutions. And the rebuttals from the government for the second, opposition is trying to say that manipulation of sympathy can actually happen because these victims can actually be manipulated by the act of criminal. We believe that however petty it is, crime is not actually persuasive or can actually persuade people to forgive them. That's why we believe if the cases of victims actually want to actually forgive the criminals, it is not by the act of crime that manipulated them. It is the fullest empathy of the victim to actually, or the fullest bodily autonomy for them to decide and consider that they should actually forgive these people. How stated by the evidence or the example stated by my previous speaker, how I am actually rich and I am robbed by someone, but I think that I can still be rich. The amount of money that robbed by the person is just a little amount. So I consider it as charity. I want to forgive him. So please don't charge him with any prosecution of being a thief or being a robber, because I believe that they are desperate because they are poor and whatnot. Because poverty or birth lottery situations are not mitigating factor that can let them to actually escape out from doing those crimes. But we humans who have this feeling of empathy and consent, we can actually decide to actually forgive them because we understand the situation to begin with. And even the society actually decide not to punish them, then why authority should strictly uphold to the principles of law or whatnot and think that it is a proper justice to begin with. Sit down. So opposition also stated how forgiveness does not work as crime still happens at the second time or whatnot. They keep on saying that even if in the status quo, even if you put them in jail time or whatnot, crimes still happen. Both sides believe and concede that crime still happens at the end of the day. But we believe that we believe that first timers that are actually doing this crime can be deterred from this certain situation. We believe that it also not only for the criminals, it's also not only the issue about the offenders, it is also the issues about the people who actually try to forgive and try to integrate better with society, that choosing it to actually not to prosecute the people who actually commit this crime. But even if in the worst case scenario they do the crime again, then they will be prosecuted. This punishment is a must. Sit down. Opposition also stated how this will actually confirms safety in society. We believe crime will not be deterred that easy by just putting them in a jail time. We believe it is also not will be a proper justice for them by just forgiving them, because sympathy will happen at the end of the day. But they never stated how sympathy will happen at the end of the day. When these criminals are put into jail and not being accepted by society, when they get out of society, even though they commit such petty crimes, just because they have this label and being offenders, people will not integrate with them better at the end of the day. Because we believe integration happen better. We believe the issues today, who serves justice better, and by the opposition side, they only uphold to the principle of punishment and law that can serve the best justice. But we believe it is also the consent, also the understanding and integration of society, the tolerance that happens in our side for the victim, offenders and authority can actually provide a better justice. And it is the best condition for the victims, because it is under their consent and under their empathy to actually choose to actually forgive a certain crimes. It is the best interest and best condition for the offenders to actually reform and have a chance to actually be better, even if in the worst case scenario they will repeat it again, but they will be prosecuted at the second time. So they have the narrative that they cannot actually repeat a crime at all. So reclarifications coming from our side, we believe that progression happens better when it is the matter of authority considering the consent of people. Integrations happen better on our side because we provide acceptance instead of segregation of these people. We believe that justice is served better in government.
The government whip spent 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable educators, now I would like to call upon the opposition whip, Mr. Ahmad Haikal Shahadan, to support the case of the opposition bench. Hear, hear.
Madam Chair, it's a shame that side government today wants to uphold the law but only see the law as to provide closure to victims and not to protect society, rehabilitate criminals, deter society from doing these crimes. How can 4 pillars of law be upheld on side government today when you're only depending on society's perception and the victim's closure? Because even if there are rehabilitation, retribution and the 4 pillars of law exist on side government today, we believe it's a weak legal institution that they are implementing on this work. A few flaws and problems that they have today provided today in today's debate. First, they see the law only to provide closure and nothing else. We believe it's problematic in this kind of situation because we believe that victims are different when the same is problematic when the same degree of crime is committed by these criminals, but the victims have different emotional states. We believe it's problematic, but I'll further explain that in my other responses. Second, they assume that all victims are willing to forgive and forget in all, regardless of all their crimes. But then again, the third flaws and problems, they widen the scope of they widen the scope of crimes, but excluding the crimes that merit capital punishment. For the debate to go further, we need to know what sort of crime are we considering, because you assume banks would forgive bank robbers. We tell you no. You assume rapists or pedophiles to be forgiven by their victims. We told you that doesn't happen on side government today. Fourth, they see this as a fair judgment, and I'll explain more on my other responses. Fifth problem is that they don't understand 100% how retribution even works, because retribution is not just for victims' closure. Retribution is to compensate as well because of the acts of these criminals who have broken the law. Because now retribution from the government and society still is not satisfied on side government today. Sit down. You're satisfying one form of retribution, which is the victim's retribution, but you put a blind eye on 2 other stakeholders in today's motion. The logical leaps that have been provided by the first and second speakers. First, they assume people would not want to go through the legal processes. Second, they assume all victims would like to forgive regardless of the crime that these criminals have done. Third, in the circumstances of the Seoul ferry incident that has happened to South Korea, for example, this shows how victims' family would do anything they can for the ones who should receive punishment to be punished. But even if these victims' family forgive, are the crimes of the criminals justified? Are the people, the ones who commit the crimes, can be justified? We tell you no, because they are still considered as criminals on side government today. It's just that the fact that they are giving a second chance, which I will elaborate further on why we cannot give second chances to these kinds of people. But before that, yes.
It is not mandatory to everyone to accept the fact that they have to forgive these kind of criminals, number 1. Number 2, the fact that if it's justified, if you wanted a consent to it, if I robbed Maybank and Maybank wanted to forgive me, why not?
Sit down. We don't have a problem with giving forgiveness. We don't have a problem with sympathy. What we have a problem today is when you forgive, you are letting these criminals go free, roaming free in our society. When you free people from prosecution just for the sake of forgiveness, we tell you it's problematic on your side, even to begin with. Because let's take a look at their mechanism by saying that black and white letters, recordings with the signatures of these victims. Their whole mechanism can also happen on our side as well. It can happen on side opposition as well. It's not mutually exclusive on side government today. The opposition does not have a problem with forgiveness. What we have a problem is when you allow these criminals to be freed from prosecution. This is what side government have to understand. Their mechanism and all of their goals are not mutually exclusive on their side, but in the end, it can also happen on side opposition today. We still provide rehabilitation even better, retribution even better, deterrence even better, protection to society even better on our side, and in the end, we believe that our goal achieves their goals as well. I have 5 responses in today's debate, and this is my first one. Fairness to all. They talked about providing fairness to all. We tell you it's only fair for the criminal. Why? Because the victim will receive closure, even if the victims receive closure. But does society accept this kind of situation? We tell you no. For example, a thief who broke in a house is forgiven by the house owner. Will safety happen in society? I tell you no, because now society wants safety and security. This is the government's responsibility, which is to provide safety and security to society. But then, when victims or the house owner accepts and forgives the criminal, we tell you, they will condemn the victim for forgiving the criminals even more, because now they see the victims as accomplices of criminals in the current situation, because now their houses have the tendency to be broken by the same criminal that has been forgiven by the victims in the first place. This backfires their stance on fairness to all. Second response is forgive and forget, which is to give second chances. A second chance should never be given by the victim. It should be given by a judge in the court of law who knows what he or she is doing. If you want a second chance, go through prosecution first, not run away from it. Appease the court, not appease the victim. This is what side government, side opposition believes. that to be true. Sit down. You're trying to portray the judiciary system and the legal processes that these victims have to go through is faulty and flawed, when it's already a functioning body in our government, and you fail to explain really clearly on why our judiciary system is failing. Third response. We have to pay for our crimes that we have committed. The punishment is for you to receive. The criminals must pay for what they had done. Go through prosecution, trial and punishment. Why? Because when society knows that you have received punishment, they will accept you even better and allow you to integrate with society on our side even better. Because now side government, for example, a thief, a burglar, a rapist is roaming free. Will society accept them in this kind of situations? We tell you no. Because now the victims might integrate with society, but the victims might integrate with society, but in the end the criminals has less tendency to be accepted and integrated to society. Because now, when society still perceives the criminals who are being forgiven as criminals, who just received a second chance, they will not accept these criminals to their society, to integrate with society in the end. This is the problem that side government has failed to see. Fourth response is about sympathy. Sympathy is not mutually exclusive on side government today. It occurs on our side as well. If the victims forgive, sympathy happens in our side as well. It's just that, but then the government wants and should send a message to the society that if you're poor or living in poverty or underprivileged, it does not mean you have a privilege in the eyes of the law. Because being poor does not merit you to be free from prosecution even to begin with. Inequality will happen on side government today, which they are trying to say that it's okay for poor people to do crimes as long as the victims forgive. This is something that's harmful on side government today. Last, we'll take a look at the comparatives. We take a look at the comparatives in terms of outcome. Which side satisfies the outcome? We believe that government, the occurrence happens, we believe that on-side government, the occurrence happens much more. On-side opposition today, we uphold the pillars of law in any circumstances, because in the end, our justification is that the outcome that side government wants to achieve, side opposition can achieve even better. Because now, second, in terms of mechanism, which side has a much more practical solution? We tell you that the government, in terms of the opposition, you allow the law on-side government today, you allow the law to be altered by the victims. The purpose of law does not exist, it's because in the end it's just for the purpose of providing closure to its victims. So in the end, which side is actually providing a much better and feasible solution? We tell you side opposition, and hence vote for side opposition today. Thank you.
The third speaker of the negative team spent 7 minutes and 26 seconds. To end up our debate today, I would like to call upon the Leader of Opposition, Mr. Daniel Faisal, as the reply speaker to sum up the case of the opposition bench. Hear him.
Offenders are criminals, and therefore they must be punished because they went against the law. Deputy Prime Minister said this, therefore they are on our side, because opposition also thinks that all criminals should be punished. Major flaws from the government. First, for the very first get-go, Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister never care to explain and define what sort of criminals and also what sort of crime are we talking about this debate. The definition came from the opposition side. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, discredit them, because failure to define a debate is a major problem in every debate. Second problem, since the start of this debate, this is a question that still haven't been answered. First, why should there be government intervention in this debate? Second, what are the harms of not giving closure to the victim? They simply say that forgiveness is needed, but they never explain why. The failure to explain this, therefore, our side assumes that it is okay to not give closure to the victim, because this is the trade-off that we're willing to do. Third, mechanism. They say that these criminals will be prosecuted again even if they are forgiven. Therefore, their side acknowledge that forgiveness doesn't happen in their world. Our side, we have told you that emotion cannot simply change criminals. Therefore, it is because it is their nature to commit the same crime again. For example, in the case of rapists and murderer. Even if it is hard to change criminals, we believe that in the opposition side, we can still change people if punishment is given to all criminals. Because for example in jailing, we told you that rehabilitation happens because of the procedures that happen when you are jailed. Our mechanism works better in this debate, therefore we have weighed in terms of mechanism. So first issue, victim versus society. They say to you that closure of victim is far better than closure of society. But we tell you that society, this incident is mutually exclusive, because right now, yes, victim may want to give closure. However, in the current status quo, they have a big social stigma where society can never forgive criminals that are free from being punished. Therefore, we believe that their side fails to explain why forgiveness happens on both victim and society. Second issue, which side upholds the principles of law? We have told you that the principle of law of first rehabilitation, retribution, also deterrence, and also safety. But we have told you, I've already told you why rehabilitation works on a side better. But then in terms of deterrence, they say to you that this cause works in terms of deterrence. But we tell you, when these people are punished, this cause, even though this cause does not happen outside, at least people will accept these people when they are released from jail. Therefore, we believe that in terms of rehabilitation, deterrence, it works better outside. We tell you, if we do not release these people from being prosecuted, this society will be living in fear. That is not what our opposition side want to happen. Therefore, we provide the principles of law in terms of safety. Madam Chair, winning in the MRSM have always been Kuantan's hope. Therefore, we have proven to you that we can win this debate. We say to you, we are willing to return to get the trophy and take the trophy back to Kuantan. Therefore, go with the side opposition. Thank you.
The reply speaker of the opposition bench spent 3 minutes and 37 seconds. Last but not least, I would like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister as the reply speaker from the government bench, Ms. Aisha Nanira, to sum up the case of the government bench. Here.
Test mic 1, 2, 3. Welcome to the reply speech arena. Now let's sway to side government a bit, and feels like you're going to vote for side government. Noticing a few, and most likely all of the flaws from side opposition, let's view them one by one, right? It's interesting. Number one, the fact that suddenly the avenue of choice of having to consent it to some sort of forgiveness suddenly malfunctions the police. Suddenly makes the country paralyzed in sort of a security system. Suddenly the police now are being forgiving, and suddenly the police now are being flexible towards everyone. And suddenly the security is not going to happen on our side at all. And even if those kind of consented forgiveness happens, it is considered the victims itself. And suddenly, right, the fact that they say that, hey, the judge knew better. Therefore, if the judge leaves them out, but the victim feels that it's injustice to begin with, it's okay because the judge feels so. And suddenly, right, on their side, society suddenly be the judge. Suddenly, society feels the crime that they want to give. We admit to the fact that yes, society can claim protection from side government, but the fact that if the victim's family have comprehended to these fractions, to these notions, to this narrative to begin with, or consider to the fact that they consented to this choice to begin with, therefore society would be able to respect this decision, society will be able to progress them better. And they suddenly, right, they claim that acceptance will happen better in society. How on earth would that happen, right? What's the point of giving them torture, giving them interrogating sessions, and suddenly that is claiming that, hey, society will accept them better rather than forgive them? That would clear blatant reason why side opposition should close the debate. But suddenly, right, on the reason why they should close the debate is because suddenly they don't know what capital punishment is. And the fact that they don't know the spectrums of crime, and suddenly we fail to characterize the motion well. But also, right, we believe that it serves justice in the end of the debate. How do we win this debate? 2 reasons why we should win. First, we better serve justice. Why? Because to the fact that if sympathy happens on your side, to the fact that these victims or the people who are the lowest common denominator still have to opt into interrogating sessions, still have to go to various trials to begin with. They don't get the freedom of liberty to go everywhere. They don't have the bodily autonomy to forgive them, and even if they have the bodily autonomy to forgive them, they don't get the leeway to opt out of this progress or to opt out of these processes that reopen the wounds, that given them atrocities to begin with. And the fact that even if the sympathy happens on their interrogate to sessions, have to go to a dark room with them and policemen, have to go to emotional disaster to go out to these processes, even if they're forgiven the authorities, because the authorities never listen to them anyways. But secondly, right, we better protect the lowest common denominator. How? Because we believe that remorse and atrocity is something that is very, very uphold in justice. The fact that in history, the fact that justice served the purpose when we actually give fairness towards both sides to begin with. If I myself choose to opt out of these processes because I feel that it discriminates me to go to these processes, then why should I not get this kind of fairness? Why should I deserve this kind of policy to begin with? It's the rights and freedom of this lowest common denominator and liberty to opt out of the processes, interrogating session, those kind of horrible trials, and you have to pay lawyers some more to actually fight for yourselves. The fact that this process is something that is detrimental to me as a victim itself. I already become a victim, and then I have to go to these processes just because authorities wanted to force the fact that I need to get your information, to get your consent, to get this kind of information for us to serve the law. This fuels resentment more. This will not enhance progress because society as society would never accept and would never give better progression towards these kind of criminals. Believe me and be realistic. Go aside government.